So this was constructed, it was working well. We had to do some sampling with the pond in to demonstrate that we were meeting the pollutant reduction goals, and we were. In all cases, in every sample that we collected, the pond was doing exactly what it was intended to do. And again, that was for metals.
Okay.
Well, a year later, the DEQ started to enforce the TMDL, which is the total maximum daily load. And historically, they've only implemented or required wastewater treatment plants to meet the bacteria pollutant goals, or the water quality-based effluent limits for bacteria, because bacteria, I mentioned earlier, you really can't treat in stormwater with just conventional, what we call best management practices, or just stormwater treatment devices.
Mm-hmm.
Bacteria is a very difficult one to remove from the water. So short of having chlorination, which wastewater treatment plants do, or if they don't have chlorination to kill bacteria, they have ultraviolet or ozone. Okay, so the Grand Rapids wastewater treatment plant has a big UV or ultraviolet system to basically kill all of the bacteria before it gets discharged to the river. Well, it would be cost prohibitive to do that for stormwater at a facility like this. With that said, DEQ now had to enforce this TMDL, even though it's been in place since 2005. Even before we got started with the metals, they had never enforced it because they knew they really couldn't for stormwater. Until they started getting increased scrutiny from the EPA, who is ultimately the one mandating these water quality objectives. So because the DEQ is under pressure to now enforce or implement their own TMDL, they looked for the easy targets first. And a municipal solid waste facility such as this that brings in, that has the potential for leakage and a lot of bacteria getting into the river, they came to Kent County and Covanta and said, you need to do something. And we want you to collect samples, and we want to see where we're at, and you're going to have to come up with a solution. So we have a new water quality problem.
Okay.
Even though we built this pond, it really wasn't doing anything for this new requirement of bacteria. So we collected samples, and we found that the bacteria being discharged to the river, the concentrations were way higher than what their water quality criteria was. And again, those water quality criteria really were established for wastewater treatment plants and not so much for stormwater dischargers. So we had to come up with kind of a out-of-the-box solution to meet those objectives. Go ahead.
What type of quantity? How are you measuring the quantity? What quantities are we talking about?
The TMDL, the bacteria, is for E. coli, and you've heard of E. coli before. It's very similar to fecal coliform. E. coli is hard to measure. Fecal coliform isn't, and there's a direct correlation between the amount of E. coli in water and fecal coliform. So we sampled for fecal coliforms, and it's actually a count where you filter out 100 milliliters of sample, and you let it grow on a petri dish, and then you can actually physically see those colonies grow. And the limit is 200 counts per 100 milliliters of sample. That's the limit in which, that's the goal that you have to meet for this TMDL in the Grand River. Well, we've seen elevated numbers in the tens and hundreds of thousands, which is pretty typical for stormwater. I